So welcome to Kevin and Mark, or Margaret, who joined us. I know Margaret, you might not have heard the answers to the opening question. Kevin, I can't tell if you were there or not. The opening question was related to what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. We've been talking about this seed of awakening, which is how I'm translating Buddha nature. Um, Buddha nature itself is, seed of awakening. That's sort of odd. Buddha nature itself is a translation of a Sanskrit word, tata garbha. Garbha means seed, right? And tata is, you could translate as the way it is. Sometimes it's translated a little bit more succinctly as suchness, but that's sort of heady, right? So I like the seed of the way it is, but since the way it is naturally awake, I just go the seed of awakeness or the seed of awakening. So that's the idea, right? There's another word that gets used, which is sugatagarbha, which means happy seed of the way it is. So I'm just going with the seed of awakening for the moment. And we've been talking about that seed of awakening as having a lot of the qualities of what an open blue sky is like. So it's clear and bright and warm and available, and the sky is everywhere, or space, if you think of it as space, space is everywhere. Um, it's accommodating, right? And so, having spent a couple of weeks talking about that, I thought it might be useful to spend a little bit of time of what it is not. And we had some great answers. So, Margaret and Kevin, I'm headed towards inviting you, and I should have pinned the video here on me, so it's not you all on Facebook. The question that got asked was, what is the open sky not or not like? And we had two votes for rock. Right? It's not like a rock. It's not like a dog or a tree. It's not solid. And interestingly, it's not fluid. It's not empty, as in nothing there. It's not interrupted or non-functional like a bad Zoom connection. It's not a dark cedar forest. It's not like trying to escape, and it's not real nor mean. So, Margaret, I don't know if you want to unmute for just a moment and jump in and say what you think it's not. You had an interesting answer this morning when we talked about this.
I have a different answer now. I
Oh,
practiced.
okay.
It's not boundaried.
It's not boundaried. Okay. And Kevin, that's an excellent answer. Kevin, does anything come to mind for you that you want to share?
It's not a box.
Not a
Box.
box.
I'm thinking of the box that I sometimes have around my head.
I like that. Okay. So it's not a rock, a dog, a tree. It's not solid or fluid. It's not empty. It's not like a bad Zoom connection. It's not a dark cedar forest. It's not like trying to escape. It's not real. It's not mean. It's not boundaried. And it's not a box. Margaret and I were talking last night, and this is coming right out of the teachings of Chogyam Trungpa, where there is this natural sort of the way it is of how every being, so let's just keep it how we as human beings experience this being here. So there is a sense of awareness. It's like there's a moment of awareness. And then that moment of awareness is sort of like three steps, right? So there's the moment of awareness, and then almost immediately, you might say immediately, there is a moment of self consciousness. Oh, I'm here. Oh, you're there. And so there's awareness, self consciousness, and then other. What we're talking about is very connected to that experience of awareness that underlies everything. Um, the the experience of selfing, how often like today words are made into gerund. So we talk about adulting, right? So in Buddhism, you could talk about selfing, right? Like immediately awareness becomes selfing, like, me, right? Meing, right? And we've been, it's more like a river than a rock, right? It's moment by moment experience. This is the awareness. It's awareness plus experience, awareness plus experience, awareness plus experience. Each moment of that becomes me. Oh, me. Oh, me. And then it gets strung together. Me, into, and we've forgotten, right? Um, the awareness that underlies it. Now, some of us are more inward focused and others are more outward focused. And that's a dance that happens through life, that it changes from one to another. So maybe instead of being the rock of me, some of us are going, you. It's the same thing. It's just a different rock. Same thing, different rock, right? But, please hear that dance, that movement, right, from awareness to self to other is just what it's like to be alive. So let's celebrate that. Like that's just the way it is. That every moment has this dance happening. It's not like, oh, we're trying to get away from selfing. That's actually functionally impossible. So let's not bother doing something that won't work. Or youing, let's not get away from youing, right? In this context, what we're trying to do is just be aware that there is this movement, this sort of like, you might say, impulse to sort of go from awareness to me or awareness to you, awareness me, you, right? It's just this dance that every living being is doing. And what the teachings are trying to point at is that that's like a river. It's always flowing by, but not necessarily fluid. So I was interested in the answers that said not fluid, right? Because it's not a river. It's not literally a river, right? It has the qualities of flowing, always changing, dynamic, unpredictable. It feels connected, but there's no solid connection between the moments. Is where river is a nice metaphor for it, right? So one of the key things to say about this Buddha nature, this um, awareness and then self-consciousness other, is it's not me. So I can't hold on to it and go me, my Buddha nature, right? Then somehow you've missed it, right? And I can't hold on to it and go, it's being kind to you, right? It's not holding on to a particular frame of mind or a particular posture towards the world. It's a little bit more open and dynamic. So classically in Buddhism, that is this open, dynamic, flowing connection is called shunyata, which we've talked about as open, empty, and full. Each moment is open as it goes by. It is empty of any rock to hold on to, any solidity, and yet it's full of possibility. So when we're doing the contemplation of Buddha nature and today's contemplation of, like, imagine the blue sky, it's open, empty of anything to hold on to, and yet lots of possibilities. It could be a rain cloud, heavy with rain and dark, or a light and wispy cloud. It's not the cloud. It's not the content of the sky. It's the fact that the sky itself is open and receives everything. And yet, how easy it is. In fact, it's sort of a universal temptation. Temptation's not the right word. A universal impulse to want to take the openness and make it into a thing. We've forgotten, I think, in our culture, maybe those of us who are on this call remember because we're meditators and students of Buddhism and we've worked with this for a while, but so many have forgotten that the idea of a permanent soul, a permanent me, there's something permanent about me, right? To hold on to. So let's just call it soul for a minute. That got made up. Somebody had to make that idea up. I might suggest to you that that got made up and came into our, collective experience somewhere around 7,000 years ago. But the history of the idea isn't as important as knowing that it just got made up. And at the time of the Buddha, that idea, soul, had gone a long way on its journey. And if you have a soul, then you have gods. You have a sky god, and we're serving the sky god. We have to make offerings, and the sky god has an enemy, and and you have this whole development of believing in me and other, and the big me in the sky and its others. And then Buddha would be asked about that, and he'd go, sort of made up. It's not necessary. You don't need to believe in that. If you want to believe in that, Buddha never told people not to believe in it. He just said it's not necessary. That often he just wouldn't answer the question. It's like, let's have another question. Right? It's not helpful to go down that road too far. What is helpful is to go back to this seed of what it's like to be awake, and to look inside your own experience for a moment of openness or awareness. And then how fast it is that we fill that in with me and then other. So there's this moment of openness and then me or other, there's this impulse. But inside of that impulse is awareness. It's always there, always waiting. I think about this in terms of practice, and just to go back to a foundation level practice, and some of you have heard me talk about this many, many times. I talk about it as the 3 R's of we're doing a practice of we're resting our awareness on the breath or with the breath, right? And then we recognize when we've drifted away, that's the 2nd R. But also at that moment where you've recognized that your attention has drifted away, that's a moment of awareness. You just return to being aware with the breath. So it's rest, recognize, return. Many meditators just hear the first part of recognize, and they're sort of like a junior high school principal going, oh, you missed it, you're out of line, get back in line, right? Back to the breath. And they're sort of scolding themselves in the practice. Not necessary. In fact, often not helpful, right? It could be more like a mother gently moving a child back to where the child needs to be, right? Back out of danger or out of distraction. Just, oh, no, just imagine feeding a child, right? The food's going everywhere and the child's playing, and no, in comes the food, You're sort of like very gently moving and scolding the child for being 2 or 1 is not helpful, right? So we're very gentle attitude of like, oh, there's a moment of recognition, and like, oh, we could go back to resting with awareness. So very helpful to know that inside of the experience of distraction and that selfing and othering is the seed of awareness. It's like, oh, whenever I recognize I've drifted away, inside of that's why it's called a seed. It's already there. I just have to return my attention to that. So you can do that when you're doing your meditation practice with breath, or you could do it when you're contemplating kindness and tenderness, or you could do it while you're driving the car or washing the dishes or anything else. You could bring your attention back to, oh, this is a moment of openness. And whatever story I'm telling myself of selfing and othering, and this is what's supposed to happen, and here's what I'm going to do next, and here's what I hope for, and here's what I'm afraid of, and this is, you can let that go in a moment of awareness, unless it's important to remember. But, honestly, most of my thoughts are not that important. They're just the brain spinning its wheels, keeping things going. When I need to think about something, that's good. But when I'm just, I'm washing the dishes, well, next I'll do the fork. I don't need to do a commentary as I wash the dishes. Just pick up the fork. Feel the warmness of the water and the suds and you just be present. Right? And so it's very aware. So there's awareness while doing dishes or while doing anything else. Now, here's the thing. You can do a lot of meditation practice and never get to awareness because you're either very busy scolding yourself or you might have forgotten that that's what we're really working with. You could become an expert breath follower, but that's not necessarily going to wake you up. So it's good to be able to follow the breath and hold your concentration. That's a very necessary, useful skill. But in context of the Dharma, of the teachings of the Buddha and the third turning teachings that we're working with, the teachings about the seed of awakening, what the purpose is, it's to become more and more familiar. Oh, this is what that experience of the seed of being awake is like. And then you rest as long as you can. And when it's not there, you come back at it. Now, the reason I started, and I talked about it not being a soul, it's so easy to make it into a thing. So we could get judgmental about it and more like the seed of awakening is always nice. Well, not necessarily. Just like it's not the rainy cloud or the wispy cloud. Or the seed of awakening is always, alert. Well, maybe when you're waking up from falling asleep and meditating, there's a moment of alertness that's alternating with that moment of recognizing sleepiness. The alertness and the sleepiness were pretty mixed together, right? It's not a solid thing. It's not a box. I love that answer that got shared. It's not a box to put something in. So whenever we put a name on the seed of awakening, I sort of like it that it's longer, seed of awakening. It's more like a description than a thing, because we know it's not a seed. It's not like a little mustard seed or acorn. It's more like this moment of awakening, this experience, and then the next experience, right? So can't put it in a box. You can't own it. You can't patent it or copyright it or monetize it. You could try, lots of people do, but it's not something that can be owned. And interestingly, although it's not something that can be owned, I'm just going to go to one more turn of what God said. It's also not something that's not there. So it's not empty in the sense of nothing happening. There's some kind of vivid experience that's available that you can't hold on to. So contemplating what the seed of awakening is not helps you get a little closer, just as contemplating what the seed of awakening is helps you get a little closer to being able to rest in the experience. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording, and I look forward to hearing what you all think of that.